Welcome back. This video is for schools and RTLBs who have already signed up. It may be useful as well for parents, caregivers, private tutors and RT-lits, but it goes into a pretty comprehensive look at what happens once you've signed up, how you allocate students to student groups, and some of the preferences and other things that you can set. So let's get cracking. We'll log in. So I'll put in our password and email. So we're signed in as the sample administrator. There's a button here to go to school admin. There's also this menu item. Now that will show for administrators, as will student group administration, but student group admin is the only one that will show for teachers. They don't get the full school admin. All right, let's go to school admin. Here's simple school. No active licenses, no unallocated licenses, and no expired licenses. Okay, so let's jump in and buy some licenses. You'll see that there's 3 tiers with licenses getting progressively cheaper. Individual licenses are $15 each. If you buy 30 licenses or more, they're $10 each, and 120 or more, $5 a license. These breakpoints change depending on your school role. We're trying to make sure that smaller schools don't get disadvantaged. It's more about how many of your school role you're signing up for. One other thing to note here is we looked at various more complex pricing structures and just decided to go for something quite simple, 3 tiers. But one slightly strange thing is that you'll notice, if you look carefully, that individual licenses are fine up to a certain point, but as soon as you want a certain amount, if you wanted 29, you would be much better to buy 30. In fact, if you wanted 20, you'd be much better buying 30. And it's the same as you head towards 120 from 30. At some point, there's a tipping point where you're much better to jump into tier 3 and get more licenses for essentially the same price or even cheaper than buying it just under the 120 mark. That's intentional. We are delighted the more students that get to use it, the better. So put in the number of licenses you want here. Let's try 125. 2 payment methods: credit card if you want to instantly have your licenses available and start assigning them, or invoice if you prefer to go with that. We'll jump in and do invoice. And as soon as we hit purchase, we come back here and we can see one order has been invoiced and awaits confirmation. If you are buying, let's say 35 licenses via credit card, we can have a look at that. It moves to the Stripe interface to take that, 35 licenses, $10 each, credit card details here, and bang, those will appear instantly. All right, I've taken a wee diversion into our back end just to approve the invoice, and so here we are again. And now we have the 125 licenses from the invoice and also the 35 from the credit card. 160 unallocated licenses. All right, the first thing to do when organizing your licenses is to start adding student groups. These might be class 1, class 2, class 3, whatever kind of group works for you. So we'll add one and we will call it class 1. And you want a teacher email. The teacher will get sent an email asking them to set a password and everything, but the admin can set that. We'll have like teacher1@sample.com. Let's create that student group. And there we can see there is class 1 as a student group and the teacher is teacher1@sample.com. All right. We can add multiple student groups. Class 2, teacher2@sample.com. And we'll see how those class groups look to teachers when they sign in. You can actually check into them with admin privileges by going to student groups up here, and you can see class 1, class 2. You can further add them from here as well. You can see which students are in them. At the moment, there's none, obviously, and I'll start talking about these preferences. So I'll just step back to being the administrator because that's where preferences, as we scroll down, start. This is a preference that's only for administrators. You can be notified when students are added or licenses are assigned to students. You'll get an email. Emails will be collated so you don't get 1,000 emails coming in if that happens, but it will give you, if you do want to monitor and know when students are being added or licenses are being assigned to those students, you can get emails. These preferences here relate specifically to how Wordchain is for the student. Generally, you can leave all these on to start with. As students progress through and they want to go faster and don't need quite as much scaffolding, you may find yourself turning these off. I'll go through them now. So Wordchain has students manipulating and changing words. So at a very simple level, changing cat into hat. So they will be told, here's cat, change it into hat. Or what can you change to turn it into? There's variations on that. But essentially, once the students get going well enough, if you feel like that's actually slowing them down, you can not have them say change it to. Each word, again, to help reinforce things, will have sounding out the individual tiles. K, a, t. Again, if that's slowing them down and they're flying along, you can turn that off. For further reinforcement, again, when they get a word right, it gets repeated to them. And for scoring, it can show a perfect word message. Chain levels, each level has a set of chains that allows you to go into that, and generally students will start on the first chain and open that up and then open the second one. As they get further along and they want to just be able to tackle it from whatever stage they like, you can unlock the chain levels so they can access any of the chain levels. Again, at the start, locking the chain levels is absolutely fine and having them go through linearly. And the final one is there is an intro animation that uses a bit of comedy, but there is the word bumhead in there. Some people have asked us to not have that in there, so if you uncheck that, the student will not hear that word in the intro animation. And then, yeah, it's just a matter of hitting updated preferences, and we'll just scroll back down and it says there preferences are updated. So that will be the general preferences for the entire school. When you are logged in as a teacher or as an admin looking at groups, you can actually override those preferences with these class-wide ones, so, or student group role-wide ones, really. So if you check that, these will then take over just for that student group over the school preferences. So this does allow some granularity, and in fact there's further granularity which we'll get into. You can set it per individual student as well, but allows you to have a general set of preferences that, okay, as a general rule, students who are trying this for the first time should hear all the scaffolding that we provide to help them understand what they're doing. That, you know, take this word, change it into this, and the word is at. Now where are you heading to with that to turn it into hat? Positive reinforcement, replaying the word afterwards, showing perfect word messages, all those things kind of make sense as students are starting out. But if you end up with a class that's leaping ahead, or if you end up with individual students that you kind of feel don't actually need that extra scaffolding, they're doing really well, then you can go down and change the preferences down to that student granularity. That's pretty much it for the admin side of things. What we're doing here is now stuff in the student groups is what a teacher will see. They won't see the school admin, they'll see student groups though, and they can add a student. Pretty simple process. First asking for an email, so we'll go student@sample.com. They need a name, so sample student. Student passwords have a lot less restrictions on them. 6 characters and just 1 non-letter. I'm going to put in simple, S-I-M-P-L-E, and then the numeral 1. You can make them as more complex if you wish, but just for students being really easily able to remember their password and log in wherever they are, we've relaxed the password restrictions on that. And so there we can see our sample student with their email address. They currently have no license. We can add a license. And these things here, rank level, last played, times played, are just an overview of As they do better and better, they go up through ranks. Again, this is just a positive reinforcement, encouragement to keep going. The level that they're at is again another reinforcement. Some information about when they last played and the amount of times played, so you can just get a quick overview of how students are doing. Okay, let's look at adding a license. So click the Add License button for the student, and there's a choice of Wordchain 1, 2, 3, and 4. There is fairly extensive support, PDFs and videos about how to assess students and work out which Wordchain they'll be best to start at. Wordchain 5 is not on here, but it is in beta testing at the moment. Let me just check. Wordchain 5 is aimed at older readers, and there's lots more complex and tricky phonemes in that. Words like deceitful, musician, syllabus, typhoid, intermediary, miraculous, unrelieved, hundreds of other advanced words. So that is in the chain, in the pipeline at least at the moment, but for now it's Wordchain 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, we'll just add Wordchain 1 for this student. As soon as I click OK, it shows where the license for this student is. It's Wordchain 1 and when it expires. We can keep adding students, and you can see up here that there's one license used and there's 159 left available. We also offer a service for bulk import of students. We were hoping to have that public facing so that you can do it yourself, but at the moment it's still in development. We are quite happy to be contacted about that though, just to get a spreadsheet with students' first names, last names, email addresses, and what license you would like to be assigned to the student. Or don't have a license, let's just get all the students in so that you can assign them as you wish. Okay, so we've got our student added to the Class 1 student group of Simple School. We've used one license and we've got 159 other unused licenses ready to assign. There's one more button here that I'll look at, which is the View Details, which will jump you into details about that particular student. Again, what student group they're in, what license they've had assigned, and these things will fill out as they begin to use Wordchain. Here is where you can change a student's password if they really forget it. There is a lost password which can be email reset, but if the student for some reason isn't up to that, you can change the password as a teacher or administrator right here. The game preferences, you can start them on any of the levels, make a recommended lesson, and when they enter Wordchain themselves, they'll see a little feather next to the level, which is the recommended level that you think the students should start at. So there is a way to say, here's where I want you to focus on in Wordchain. Again, you just choose that level, hit update recommended lesson, and if I scroll back down, that's been updated. The game preferences are the next thing. We talked about this in terms of the granularity before. You can override either the student group and the school's general preferences if you want to change any of these things. If you feel the student is particularly flying ahead and doesn't need a lot of the scaffolding, or if they particularly shouldn't hear the word bumhead, you can change that here as well. Or if you're happy for them to jump to whatever chain level they want, do that. Make sure you've got override, and these will be the preferences for that student. Right, I'll just head back to student groups, Class 1. So as a teacher or as an admin, having set up the student groups, added students to them, and if you wish, setting a specific level for the student to start at, and any specific preferences you may feel are important for that student can then log in with their email and that password and get cracking into Wordchain and improving their reading and spelling skills. But we'll look at that in the next video.